Welcome viewers, my name is Patrick Luck with StoneSoupProgramming.com, and today I'm going to show you how to save an image in a database and then display it in the browser later on. And we're going to do this with Spring Boot and using IntelliJ IDE and the Kotlin programming language. So to get started, we're going to create a new project and we're going to use this Spring Initializer because that's a really easy way to spin up a Spring Boot project. You just click Next. We give it a name. And then we're going to set the language to Kotlin. Next, we're going to tell it what we want. And in this case, we want web. We want the Timeleaf template engine. We want SQL with JPA and HSQLDB. And that should be everything we need here. Yep. Okay, so then we click Next. And we're going to let the IDE generate a project for us. And here's the brand new project. Now the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to configure our applications. So if you expand out these folders and go to the resources folder, you have this applications.property here. And we're going to configure this first to work with the database. So the first thing we want to set is the Spring JPA Hibernate DDL Auto to create drop. That's going to instruct the application to create any database tables that we need or drop any unneeded database tables. We also want to tell this thing to use Hibernate. So we're going to use Spring JPA properties Hibernate current session context class, and we're just going to set it to org Spring Framework ORM Hibernate 5 Spring Session Context. And then finally, we need to give it the JDBC driver. And org HSQLDB JDBC driver. And just like that. And what this will do is this will tell the application to create an embedded data source. You certainly could configure it at this point to connect to an external database, which is useful depending on what you're doing, but for our needs, the embedded will be good enough. The other thing is we have to enable file uploading in Spring. So let's do that while we're here. We want to set it to the max file size. I'm going to set that to 25 megabytes. And we need to set the max request size also. Also to 25 megabytes. I believe the defaults are at 10 megabytes. You'll have to check the documentation. But this should be everything we need in our applications.properties. So now if we go to the Kotlin code, this is where it gets fun. And let's begin by defining a persistent class that'll store in the database. We're just going to call it persisted image. And we're going to put in our JPA annotations here. Importing as necessary. Now this part is very important. We're going to store the image as a byte array in the database, and you have to annotate it as a lob for large binary object. And in Kotlin, you have a byte array class, and in my case, I want it nullable, so there's the question mark behind the data type to indicate that it's nullable. We're also going to store the multi-purpose internet mail extension, MIME, which will be useful to stream the image back to the browser. And so that's all we would need to store the image in the browser. But we also want to be able to display the image in the browser. And we're going to do that right here in this persisted image class. We're going to create a function, toStreamingUri. And that's going to return a string. And what we need to do is we need to turn this byte array into a base64 string. And we can use data type converter found in JDK, print base64 binary, and then pass it bytes. And then we have to return a special string that tells the browser how to render this. So we're going to return, we start with data, and we're using Kotlin's string template functions here. We're going to pass the mimic property, which we store. That's a field on our class, line 15. We're going to tell it's a base64 string, and then we're going to append our base64. And at this point, when the browser sees a string passed to the src attribute on an HTML image tag, it will know how to display the image. So that's really, really cool. Now, next thing we want to do is we want to be able to save this image in the database. So let's start by configuring our data store. And we need a bean definition to get at the Hibernate session factory. By default, Spring Boot likes to work with JPA. Nothing against JPA, but on a small project like this, it may be simpler to use Hibernate. Also, there are times where you want vendor-specific APIs. So I'm going to show you how to unwrap the entity manager so that way we can get a session factory. And all we're going to do is call this entity manager factory.unwrap and pass it session factory Java class. And that's all we have to do. So the container already has an entity manager for us that we can just inject. We just need to unwrap it. So we're going to call this a configuration class. And then we're going to annotate this with @bean so that way Spring knows this is a bean definition. And at this point, we can inject session factory into our classes as needed, which was what we're going to do next. So let's create a repository class. And here we're going to inject session factory. Mark it as repository. So that way it's picked up on component scanning. And we're just going to have two methods. We're going to have save persisted image, session factory current session dot save or update. Very, very boring here. It's all we have to do. At this point, this code will save our image in the database. We're going to want to display all our images later on in the application, so let's just write a load all current session, create criteria, persisted image class.java list, and then we have to cast it to as a list of persisted image. Otherwise, we will not be able to compile our code due to Kotlin's typing. Now we want a service class that goes between repository and controller and contains our transactional boundaries. So let's write image service. This is also a very boring class. We're just going to inject our image repository into this one. And we're going to have a save and load all method. So this class just basically ends up wrapping our repository class in this case, but as you will see, we put our transactional boundaries on this class. So there's our save. And there's our load all, which we don't even need a method body. Now we decorate with transactional, and that will have Spring manage our database transactions for us, which is what we want. We don't want to be doing that ourselves unless there's a need to. So now we need a controller class. And I'm going to show you in this class how we handle uploading a file on the server end, and then we'll flip over to the HTML code and you'll see it there. So let's start by creating index controller, and we can inject our image service class into it, just like that. It's decorated as a controller. Let's map it to, let's import controller. We're going to map it to the root URL of the application there. Next, two functions. Do get for HTTP get model, which returns a string. And do post. Now do post is the one that we're interested in here. First we need to annotate one of our parameters as request part. And we're going to pass it a name, and this is going to be the name attribute on our input tag. And we're going to use this multi-part file class. Which is provided by Spring to represent an uploaded file. Let's inject a model into it also. And have it return string. Also going to return us to the index page. Let's map these to HTTP get and HTTP post. Okay. Now, before we implement these methods, we have this multi-part file class here. And this class has properties that we're going to want to store in our database, but we need to have a way to get from multi-part file to persisted image, which is what we have. So we can do that real easy. Kotlin lets us write what are called extension functions. And I'm going to show you how to write one of those real quick. And this is going to make it very easy to turn this multi-part file into a persisted image. So we start fun, multi-part file to persisted image. And then we can just create a new instance of persisted image. We'll use our bytes. See, multi-part file has a bytes property, which represents an array of bytes. And those bytes are the actual data in the image. And then the other thing is we want the meme, so we'll just use the content type property. And that's all we have to do. So now let's finish our controller. On a GET request, we're just going to want to return all our images that are stored in the database. So let's do that. Image service, load all. And that's all we're going to do there. On the post, we want to save to the database first. And this is why we wrote our function. Now we can call multi-part file to persisted image. And just like that, one line it. And we're going to do the same thing that we did in the get. We're just going to send all the images back to the data store, or to the view. And that's our server code. So now we just need a page to show us an action. So let's go new HTML file, index.html. Now what we want to do is we want to add our time leaf markup. And time leaf requires our documents to be well-formed XML, so we have to close all our tags here, or it will not cooperate. I like to use Bootstrap to make my pages look nice and pretty. It does depend on jQuery. Now let's add Bootstrap. Again, making sure to close our tag. Now for the body, this is very important. We're going to define a form here that's going to actually upload the image. All right. We can map the action to our index, and our controller will pick that up. But we have to make absolutely sure that we set the encoding type to multi-part form data. Otherwise, it will not upload files. And then let's create this. This is just a standard image upload HTML tag, so we're going to change this type to file. Now, name is very, very important. We're going to call it image, but if you remember back to our server code, I said that we annotate request part as image, so that's the exact same value as the name attribute in this form. So that's how the server knows to map the file to that part of the post method. And then usually we want to limit what can be uploaded, so we'll do image JPEG, image ping, image GIF. That's all we have to do for our form there. The other thing we'd like to do is probably see our images once they have been uploaded, so we'll use this each tag, and we're going to grab the images from the model. Remember our do get do post methods. Model add attribute, model add attribute. So that's how we sent them back to the template engine. And we're going to call this source. And if you remember all the way back to the beginning of this tutorial, we had a toStreaming URI method on our persisted image class. Which we can pass that to the src attribute of the image tag, and the browser will know how to render it, which is really, really great. All right, so that should be our template code. I'm just going to check this real quick for any missing closing tags. It does appear as if we are in good shape, so let's go ahead and fire up the application, and hopefully it'll run normally. So. So now the application is starting up. All right, so let's open our web browser. And if we navigate to localhost port 8080, okay, so what did I do wrong here? And this is what I was talking about. If you see something on this on your stack trace, it means that you forgot to close your tag. So let's reboot, because I forgot to close my input tag on our form here. It's a very easy mistake to make. Okay, now the application is restarted. Let's try it again. There we go. So let's pick a picture off our hard drive. And I have one of the famous Maryland blue crab. Let's submit it. Oops. What do we do wrong here? We do have to annotate our classes as entity. That's a JPA annotation. So I'm going to give it one more go here. Okay, the application's restarted. Let's try it one more time. And there you go. I submitted this picture and it streamed right from the database to my browser. If you inspect it, and there's the string. If we look at the actual HTML here, that is our encoded string that we made in our entity class, appended right to the src element. So I hope you like this tutorial. Again, there's a lot of ways you can store files directly in a database without having to resort to cloud solutions. Basically, just store them as a lob on your entity classes. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to comment here on the site. Otherwise, visit me at my blog at stonesoup.programming.com for a text version of this tutorial. And you can also download the code from my blog also. Thank you for watching.